This year, Motorola, now owned by Lenovo, released the G4, G4 Plus, and G4 Play. All very similar devices with slightly different specs and features, but today we're specifically taking a look at the Moto G4, and here's our review. The phone is a decent budget competitor, starting you at $200 for 16GB of internal storage or $230 for 32GB. It's not the cheapest smartphone with decent specs like the ZTE Z Max Pro, which costs $100 less, but you still have to stop and appreciate what Motorola has brought to the table, like the fact that you have the option of customizing the Moto G4 with Moto Maker, something that Motorola provides that no other smartphone maker does. A similar but much improved design from its predecessors, the G4 has that same dimple on the back we all know and love, a headphone jack top and center, and a micro USB port on the bottom supporting Motorola's turbocharge. One of the minor downsides on the build is the buttons. They aren't very tactile and feel relatively soft when pressed upon, with button placement being a bit too high for my fingers. I often find myself having to reposition my hand. On a more positive note, I do very much enjoy the texture on the power key, as it allows me to easily differentiate which button I'm pressing. The back of the G4 is removable, but the battery is not. Underneath, you get a micro SD card slot for expandable storage, as well as a SIM card slot supporting every major US carrier as the phone comes unlocked. And with the cover snapping back on snugly, it doesn't feel like it's going to loosen up or come off easily, but if it ever does, you can swap it for a new one that has a different color. Anyway, with a cheap price comes a cheap build, meaning the entire phone is plastic. Still, that's not necessarily a bad thing. The phone feels solid, comfortable, and has a good weight to it. The display is larger and of a higher resolution when compared to the much smaller Generation 3 Moto G, which had a 5-inch 720p display. With a 5.5-inch 1080p LCD, the G4 is a budget smartphone that can push more pixels on a bigger canvas. The screen offers great viewing angles and extremely high brightness, even outshining my Galaxy S7, which is obviously a more expensive device. With a mode in the settings to oversaturate and make colors pop, the LCD panel at $200 is no joke. The front-facing dual speakers on the previous Moto G is no longer with us. The G4 has a single speaker on the top of the phone, which doubles as an earpiece speaker. But it's still front-facing, very loud without becoming distorted, and it's hard to block by accident. Plus, it's better than the downward-facing speakers on the OnePlus 3 or Galaxy S7, so I'll take it over those. As far as performance goes, the G4 is relatively smooth and handles everyday tasks, emailing, messaging, video watching, social media, etc. without a problem. And even though it only has 2GB of RAM, hopping between apps and application reload time is exceptionally fast. Still, it does feel sluggish when you start playing games. The Moto G4 does tend to get bogged down easily if you run a heavy 3D game such as Real Racing 3 or Gangster Vegas. The Adreno 405 GPU just isn't hardy enough for that. When playing a less graphic intense game, it was smoother and the phone didn't overheat as much, making it a pleasant experience. Benchmark scores do tell a different story, but it's been very responsive and snappy, giving me little to no problems at all on everyday usage besides hardcore gaming. My reasoning behind this is the software. Ultimately, this is still running the latest version of Android Marshmallow, and since there isn't any bloatware to be found, you'll have a near Google experience. You do get some of Motorola's extra features such as chopping twice to toggle the flashlight, lifting the phone up from a flat surface when it rings to automatically switch to vibrate, or twisting your wrist twice to open the camera. You also still get ambient display, letting you see all of your notifications, time, date, and battery without fully turning on the display. There are no motion sensors on the front though, so moving the phone is the only way to trigger it. Besides that, it's still mostly stock Android, keeping it nice and clean. Before we move on, I'd like to give a shout out to Unity for sponsoring this video. Unity connects your computers and mobile devices so you can easily access all of your files from anywhere. It's a free install and you can stream videos, music, photos, and share files of any size from your computers to your smartphones. Check it out now through the link in the description. Now back to the video. Powering all of this is a 3000 mAh battery, getting me around 4 hours of screen on time in daily usage. So for me, battery performance is about average and it really depends on how you use the phone. Typically, I have Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS, the brightness turned almost to the max, along with some gaming, messaging, and social media surfing. The battery handled all of this very well, letting me get through an entire day without charging. Plus, with Motorola's turbocharge, I was able to fully charge the device in just under 2 hours. Curious about the camera? Well, don't get too excited, as it's basically just like the Moto G3. The rear camera is still 13 megapixels, autofocus, has an aperture size of f2.0, and dual LED flash. The front-facing camera is 5 megapixels, and there's no optical image stabilization, laser autofocus, or phase detection. However, you do get these camera features on the Moto G4 Plus with its 16 megapixel camera. If you take a look at the camera app, it's pretty simple with options for video recording up to 1080p, panorama, slow motion, and even a manual mode. While Motorola hasn't upgraded the camera on the G4, it was and still is a solid camera for those who want to snap a quick picture. Here are a couple of sample photos. In good lighting, the colors are vivid and natural. The only problem I had is the images do tend to overexpose at times, so I did have to turn on HDR to solve this problem. In low light scenarios, the camera also got extremely noisy and lost a lot of detail. Sometimes I can't even see what I've taken a picture of, even with flash, so this is probably the worst part about the camera. Overall, the camera is still pretty solid in outdoor or indoor lighting, and at the price you're paying for the phone, this camera is not that bad. Another thing to know about the G4 is that it's no longer water resistant, but splash resistant, meaning you can't dunk it in a bucket of water, but if you happen to splash it while washing your dishes, there's still a good chance that it might survive unscathed. There's also still no NFC, which means you can't use Android Pay, data exchange, or any other NFC features, so that's unfortunate. Overall, the Moto G4 doesn't offend. It's a substantial upgrade from its predecessor with better specs and new features. With the phone being extremely budget friendly, anyone who is not really into smartphones and just wants one to get them through the day for their simple usage might find what they are looking for in the Moto G4. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure to go ham on that like button. Check out AndroidPolice.com for your latest and greatest news on Android. Definitely let me know in the comments what you think about the Moto G4, as we do read all of your comments. And with that, I will catch you guys in the next one.